Hello and welcome to yet another video in the series of what I've just decided to call building the ultimate Mac Pro 5,1. Now, thank you so much for all the viewership and interaction on the last video. It's honestly given me a little motivation to keep this channel a little more going. It's been 48 hours. And I think we're just about to cross the 1,000 view mark, which pretty good for my videos, especially considering how long it's been since I've done anything on the channel. So I truly appreciate you all watching, and yeah, I'd really appreciate the subscribe. I'd love to be able to actually join in the partner program if I keep going at the channel a little bit. But today's video is going to be a whole lot simpler. We are installing this Intertech USB 3 card, which is based on, I forget which chipset, but I'll put it in there. It doesn't say on here. But the important thing about this card is that this USB card is built using the same USB 3.0 chipset that is in the 2013 Mac Pro. So it just works in Mac OS, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to actually go ahead and readjust the camera real quick. Okay, so I've got the camera adjusted for a nice professional on the carpet unboxing, exactly what you want to do with computer hardware. So we'll just slice right on into that. Get this off of here. Now this is sort of the USB 3 card to put in a Mac if you want something cheap. Now, if I wasn't doing this on a budget, what I'd really like to put in this computer, this does not want to pop open. So can I just, there we go. I'd really like to put one of the Sonnet McFiver cards in here or something along those lines. That would give a 10 gigabit per second USB 3 along with 2 NVMe drive slots and 10 gigabit Ethernet, which is fantastic because that's kind of a lot of the things that I'd really like to be able to put in this system. And we're probably going to be adding all of those things, not 10 gig Ethernet, but 2.5 gig Ethernet through different cards, and definitely an NVMe SSD, because I'll demonstrate why that's important here in a minute. But we've got right here a bag of cables. I'm telling you to make sure that the power connections match there. That's probably good advice. But this is actually really nice because this card, here's the card. This is actually very similar to the card that It's My Natural Color used to put in his Hackintosh way back in the day. I've been watching through some of those videos recently as I've been making some of these videos recently. But this is a 4-port USB 3 card, nice and small. There's our SATA power connection. So this apparently will work without that SATA power connection, but it won't actually be able to provide very much power at all through the ports. So that's where this comes in, which will be very handy because we've got in here both a Molex to dual SATA, which will come in handy for some future projects. I think that's a nice cable. I'll keep it around. But more importantly, we've got, this is actually not crazy long, so hopefully it's long enough, but we've got a SATA power to dual SATA. And what this is going to allow me to do is I'll be able to just break one of these 2 plastic tabs off, and I'll be able to plug this into the SATA power in one of the drive slots in the system, and then plug one of these into this card and be able to power it. So I'm going to actually go ahead and get the computer popped open, and we'll take a look at installing the card. All right, so now I've got the system pulled out. I also put my light on top of the camera so that you can hopefully see what's going on a little better when we get in here. So we'll pull off the cover. And I'm going to adjust the camera a little better so that you can see inside a little better. All right, so hopefully you can see in there a bit better at least. I'm gonna get these two drive sleds out of the way, which are empty. And so we can see in there the two PCIe slots, as well as our SATA power up in there. Maybe you can see that. Probably not. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to look in here and I want to see what I need to do in order to be able to fit this in. So it looks like I am going to need to cut off this. Come on, focus. I'm going to need to cut off that piece of plastic right there. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and use this same knife I was just using a minute ago. I think it might actually be sharp enough for this. Got some needle nose pliers right here. I'm just going to pull that off like that. And there we go. So now I should hopefully be able to just plug this in right up here. I think that's going in nicely. Just want to make sure because I don't want the power pins to be lined up incorrectly and send power where it's not supposed to go. But that doesn't really click in there super tight, but it's in there, kind of. Honestly, nowhere near as nicely as I'd like it to be, but it's in there. Now the other option is you could run it out from the optical drives, because there's SATA power in there, but I don't really want to do that because A, it means I can't install a second optical drive, and B, it means that I'm going to have to run cables out through here, and it's going to not look very good and be a mess. And I don't have quite enough length to be able to do that. So we're just going to go with this. So I'm going to go ahead, and I feel like I've read somewhere that sometimes it can cause issues installing it in the top slot, but I'm going to install it in the top slot anyway. And if we have issues, we can revisit and move where it's plugged in, but hopefully it won't be a problem. So now I actually did previously, I've done a lot of previouslys before these videos, but I did previously install a different USB card in this thing. And the system would detect it. It would even detect the devices connected to it, but nothing would populate or work, whether that's any kind of device. So it basically didn't work. So there's our USB card installed. I'm going to go ahead and plug in this power. I'm just going to sit that up there so it's out of the way, but I'm going to go ahead and plug that in there. I'm going to stick that up there. And I'm going to make sure that that's pushed all the way in. So there we go. The card's installed and it's powered. So now I'm just going to give that power one more push in, make sure it's all good. It does seem that it is. I'm going to close that blade up before I land on it wrong and this video takes a terrible turn. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can put this back in here. All right, and there we go. That is installed, completely toolless, but honestly, it probably would have been easier if I did get out a screwdriver. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these hard drive sleds back in. I'm gonna go ahead and put this side panel back on. And doing this is good for two reasons, because I'm gonna flip this thing around. And if you remember, this system only has 3 USB ports on the back, and I am using all 3 of them, one for my keyboard, one for my mouse, and one for my LED mouse mat that also has my microphone installed. So all 3 USB ports on the back are filled whenever I have my setup plugged in. So I've got the 2 on the front I can use, but now I've got 4 additional USB 3 ports on the back, which is going to be very nice because pretty much the worst part of using this system is that it doesn't have USB 3, and using USB 2 for content creation stuff really sucks. Like, I've been using another system to put my media on my file server and then editing, and yeah, it's been kind of rough. So I think with that, I'm gonna go ahead and boot the system and we'll see if it works. Okay, so the camera is now what I would consider good enough. So let's go into, I'm actually just gonna do it from here because it's a lot quicker. So let's go into system information and go over to USB, or not Thunderbolt. Where's USB? Right below. So we've got our USB 3.0 bus showing, but it was actually showing perfectly fine before. So I think what I need to do is plug in a USB 3 device to actually test. Okay, so now here I have my Samsung T7, and I'm going to plug it into the USB 3 ports and see if it pops up. So it's got power. There it is. Awesome. Totally works immediately. That's cool to see. But I actually want to eject it, and I want to plug this thing into one of the ports on the front. So I'm going to plug this into one of the USB 2 ports on the front. There it goes. Mounts right up. And I'm going to run Amorphous Disk Mark on this thing because I'm very curious what the speeds are going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the 1 terabyte SSD. We'll do 2 gigs, 2 read cycles, I guess. And this is going to take a hot minute because it's got to write 2 gigs of data to the drive. Okay, now this took pretty much forever. Just to put into perspective how long this took, I went and took a dump. I went out and got some food. I ate some food. I watched some YouTube. And then YouTube seems to be having a massive outage because I went on Down Detector. The Down Detector website almost didn't load. It took forever to load the page. And then I saw that there were 400,000 reports of YouTube being down. So like, okay, good, it's not me. There's nothing wrong with my account. Good to know. But anyway, then I stumbled back in here and saw that it was just about done and it was finally done. So this took probably about 2 hours to complete. Absolutely ridiculous. But you can see here, 33, 31, 33, 32 on the sequential read and writes. I'll be interested if the randoms change at all. I can't actually remember what this drive can do, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot better than that on the random. And then as far as the read and write speeds, we're pretty much right at the theoretical or the real world maximum for USB 2. Now the actual real world maximum for USB 2 is like 60 megabytes a second, but you will never see that. That's like, there's just so much overhead in the USB 2 bus. Really 30 to 40 is the max that you'll see. So we're kind of right at the midpoint, the lower midpoint of what kind of speeds you would expect to see over USB 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a screenshot of that. And I'm going to go ahead and eject the drive. I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to go ahead and plug it into one of the new USB 3 ports on the back of this thing. Mounted right up. I'm going to just go ahead and quit just so we get those old results out of there. But we've got, let's click on our 1 terabyte SSD. We got our same settings there. I'm just going to move that up a bit. So let's go ahead and run all the tests. And I've got a feeling this is going to be way quicker. I may actually sit here and wait for the preparing to finish. There we go. So we are well over 10 times faster now. Oh, that's fantastic. That is the boost that this system really needed. So I'm gonna go ahead and let the test finish, and then we can do a proper little comparison between what the USB 2 speeds look like and what the USB 3 speeds are looking like. Okay, so I went ahead and ran the test on the T7, both on the USB 2 and the USB 3, and you can see there is a huge difference, which is about 10 times quicker on the sequential, which is nice, and a nice healthy boost on the randoms, especially on the 4K Kitty32. We're looking at about 10 times faster there, actually, in the reads at least. The 4K is pretty similar, but that's kind of to be expected. I guess the write, there is a pretty big difference there on the USB 3. So you can see this was a totally worthwhile thing to do, because the thing has gone from being miserable to use to copy footage to very fast. So now I'm going to just continue the trend of editing on this thing because it's been working great. And I'm going to be able to just plug the card directly into this computer and be able to transfer the footage very quickly. Now, one thing to mention is I also went ahead and ran the test on the drive in the system. And this highlights a problem that we're going to be addressing on the next video on this thing. Now, this is, I don't know why the 4K writes are so much lower than the reads, but that's kind of besides the point. And then it flip-flops down here. Whatever, that's kind of besides the point. We're mostly looking at the sequentials anyway. So right now I've got a 1 terabyte PNY SATA SSD inside of this thing. And you can clearly see that it is not running anywhere near as quick as it should. And that's because the system only has a SATA 2 bus, not a SATA 3 bus. So on a SATA 3 bus, we'd be expecting like 550, 560 megabytes a second read and write. And this is a SATA 2, so 3 gigabit a second bus, and it is pretty much half the speeds that we would expect to see if this drive was connected to a SATA 3 bus. Now, funnily enough, this actually translates pretty well at the difference between 5 gigabit per second USB 3 and 3 gig per second SATA 2. It looks, like we've got about 33% or so more speed there, which would, or not quite 33%, whatever the percentage is. My point is that the difference between 3 gigabit a second and 5 gigabit a second is pretty much in line with the difference between these numbers here. So yeah, very much worthwhile upgrade. Although the funny thing is that we are actually not really able to fully utilize the USB 3 port on this thing right now, because the internal storage is slower than what USB 3 is capable of, which is kind of wild actually. So yeah, very successful upgrade, very cheap upgrade, very easy upgrade, something that any of you out there with an older Mac Pro should definitely do. This card just works out of the box in macOS 10.8 all the way up to Sequoia, and I would assume Tahoe once OpenCore supports Tahoe as well. But yeah, Thanks for watching. I'll put a link in the description where you can pick up this card. And we'll see you next time when we put an NVMe SSD in this thing. And we should be getting over a gigabyte per second read and write. So please like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Goodbye.